All right, today we are diving deep into a chapter from the new book, The Modern Art of War. We're going to be tackling one of the biggest, most critical questions of our time. As warfare gets more and more automated, where does human responsibility actually begin, and where does it end?
The chapter kicks off with this really powerful maxim, and it just perfectly sets the stage for everything that follows. It makes you ask a pretty tough question right out of the gate. I mean, what's the point of winning a battle if, in doing so, we completely lose our ability to be accountable for our own actions? This is the core dilemma we're going to be exploring.
What's so fascinating here is the idea that this desire to automate war, it's not new. Not at all. For centuries, there's been this temptation to make the brutal, messy business of conflict somehow clean, mechanical, and impersonal. To hand over the burden of those life and death calls to a system that doesn't hesitate or grieve or feel doubt. Well, today, that old fantasy is just wearing some very new, very powerful circuitry.
So that leads us right into our first key idea, this fantasy of a clean war. Modern tech can now squeeze the entire chain of events, from a sensor spotting something to a weapon firing, into just a few seconds. The danger here is so subtle, but it's huge. We start to confuse the pure speed of that process with actual, good judgment.
But here's the thing. War has never been a total free-for-all. For centuries, the most effective commanders have always understood that restraint isn't a weakness. It's a form of control, a form of discipline. This whole section argues that ethics and law aren't just nice ideas you talk about after the fighting is done. They are baked into the very act of command itself.
So the first bedrock principle of the law of war is distinction. It's the absolute, non-negotiable requirement to tell the difference between people who are fighting and people who are not. Sounds simple, right? Well, as we're about to see, in the modern age, it gets incredibly complicated.
Next up, you've got proportionality. Now, this is a balancing act. It demands that any military action has to be weighed against the potential harm to civilians. The expected gain from the attack just can't be justified if the cost in innocent lives is excessive. And that's a human judgment call, not some simple math equation. And finally, there's precaution. This is not a passive rule. It requires you to actively take care, to do everything you possibly can to verify a target, and to be ready to change your mind or call off an attack if new information shows up. It's all about diligence under extreme pressure.
Okay, so we have these foundational rules, right? Distinction, proportionality, precaution. They all need deep, careful, human judgment. And that leads us to the absolute heart of the issue. How does the rise of these automated systems mess with our ability to actually apply these principles?
In this slide, this gets right to the core of the problem in the machine age. An algorithm, it sees a pattern. It sees a truck. But on the ground, that single pattern is just swimming in ambiguity. That truck could be carrying supplies. It could be a civilian just trying to get home. Or it could be a car bomb. To a computer, the visual data might look almost identical. But the meaning, the context, that's what separates a normal day from a total tragedy.
Now, let's be really clear here. The argument is not that all automation is bad. Not at all. In fact, it can be a lifesaver. It can help people sort through just insane amounts of data, reduce that cognitive overload, and make logistics way more efficient. And that brings us to what we can call the automation paradox. These systems are both incredibly helpful and at the same time potentially catastrophic.
This quote just cuts right through all the noise, doesn't it? This is the critical dividing line. It's one thing to use a machine as a tool to help a human see better. Think of it like a really advanced pair of binoculars. It's something else entirely to outsource the ultimate decision of life and death to that same machine. There's a canyon between those two things.
So the crucial point of this entire chapter really hinges on this one distinction. It's not about human versus machine. It's about how we use the machine. Are we using it for assistance, to help us, or are we slowly sliding into abdication, giving up our role entirely? This might be the single most important distinction we have to figure out in this new era.
Let's just break this down. On one side, you've got machine assistance. That's the good stuff. It widens a commander's awareness, it helps them test their own assumptions, it's a tool. But then you have human abdication, and that's the danger zone. That's when we let the machine hide the messy reality of uncertainty, when we let it replace our own judgment, and when it creates this dangerous illusion of objective truth where there really isn't any.
I love this phrasing. The polished interface launders uncertainty. Think about it. A human analyst, they might show you doubt. They might hedge their assessment. You can see the uncertainty in their face. But a computer dashboard, it just spits out a clean number,
a confidence score. It washes away all the underlying messiness and ambiguity and gives you this sterile, confident answer that's just dangerously easy to trust. A dashboard doesn't sweat.
So how does this actually happen? Well, it's not a sudden jump. It's a slow slide. And this here maps it out. First, the system is trusted. That trust means the tempo, the speed of operations increases. Pretty soon, any human who speaks up, well, their dissent just looks like a delay. A careful review of the data just feels like friction, slowing things down. And before you know it, the human in the loop is basically just a clerk, clicking a box. And accountability? Well, that becomes pure theater. So what's the solution? How do we stop this slide? The answer proposed here is a doctrine called the human checkpoint. The core idea is that the responsibility for any lethal action has to always remain legible, and that just means it has to be understandable, traceable, and clearly pinned to an actual human being.
And for that responsibility to be legible, a human has to always be able to answer these fundamental questions in plain English. If the answer to why was this action taken is just because the computer said so, then you've already lost. Accountability is gone. These questions, right here, are the ultimate test.
And this brings us to a really simple practical rule that kind of sums up the entire argument. We can and we absolutely should use technology to help us make better decisions. But the second we start using it as a shield to hide from the moral and legal weight of those decisions, that's when we've crossed a critical line.
And look, this isn't just about ethics for its own sake. This is about strategy, legitimacy, the trust of your own people, your allies, and the whole world. That is a critical strategic asset. Trading that away for a little bit of short-term tactical speed is a terrible, terrible bargain. It's like you're sacrificing long-term victory just for a quick hit of efficiency today.
And so we end right back where we started, with the central takeaway of the whole chapter. The debate we really should be having isn't about whether a machine can someday do a job better than a person. The real lasting boundary we have to defend is the one between using machines as powerful tools and abdicating our fundamental human responsibility to them. That is the line that must not be crossed.